that the Lord's Supper should be observed only on the first day of each week, my partner provided biblical reasons to prove our proposition. Reasons that should be followed primarily, if any reasons are given at all. I, however, would like to provide a look at evidence for our proposal in historical documents of Christian writing, just a few generations after the first century Christians. These historical writings solidify our proposition that in the first few generations, the Lord's Supper was observed every week and only on Sundays. Once again, it will solidify our proposition. The first historical reference to the Lord's Supper being associated with the Lord's Day is from a book called the Didache. The Didache was written anywhere from 50 to 160 AD. In Greek, Didache means teaching. The Didache, or the teaching, was written to instruct the budding Christian communities on how to worship and how to act together. In chapter 14, verse 1, it says, "On the Lord's day of the Lord, come together, break bread, and offer thanks." It is very clear here that the writer instructs that the Lord's Supper is to be observed on the Lord's day. Now, we might not take this as scriptural authority, mind you, but it is certainly information that gives insight into the typical actions of the early church. By this passage, we can see that not only that the practices of the early Christians was to partake of the Lord's Supper on the Lord's Day or Sunday, but also it represents the inseparable connection between these two institutions, Lord's Supper and Lord's Day. The next historical text is a letter written to the Emperor Trajan by the Roman governor of Bithynia, Pliny, in AD 112. Pliny's letter concerning the Christians there states, "It was their habit to assemble before daylight, and on a fixed day, and recite by turns a form of words to Christ as a God. After this was done, their custom was to depart and meet again to take food." What does this excerpt clarify about the idiosyncrasies of the early church? It tells, and from the standpoint of an outside, non-Christian source, that they met on a fixed day. If the church in Bithynia was meeting on one day out of the week, every week, it is most logical to assume that that day was the Lord's Day. Furthermore, on that fixed day, Pliny says they took food, by which he is certainly referring to the Lord's Supper. So even non-Christians like Pliny knew Christians as those people who meet on Sundays to eat a special meal together. A third historical text that connects the Lord's Supper with the Lord's Day is in the First Apology by Justin Martyr to the Roman Emperor Antoninus Pius, his sons, and the Senate. Justin Martyr was raised a pagan, but eventually converted to Christianity. He was taught philosophy all his life for many years and was wise in the ways of logic. In chapter 67 of his book, Justin writes, and on the day called Sunday, all who live in cities or in the country gather together to one place, and the memoirs of the apostles or the writings of the prophets are read, as long as time permits. Then, when the reader has ceased, the president verbally instructs and exhorts to the imitation of these good things. Then we all rise together and pray, and as we before said, when our prayer is ended, bread and water and wine are brought. And the president, in like manner, offers prayer and thanksgiving according to his ability. And the people assent, saying, Amen. And there is a distribution to each, and a participation of that over which thanks have been given. And to those who are absent, a portion is sent by the deacons. Now this particular passage offers an excellent and detailed description of the process by which the early Christians observed the Lord's Supper. In fact, Justin Martyr explicitly mentions that they did it on Sunday. The words Lord's Supper are never used, but it is more than clear by his description of the bread and wine and water that he is referring to. I told you of the Didache, which was first located east of the Mediterranean in Syria. I also mentioned Pliny's letter to Rome from Bithynia in Asia Minor. And thirdly, I cited Justin Martyr's writing in Rome. It is more than interesting that all of these historical texts are so widely spread out, and yet still connect the Lord's Supper with the Lord's Day. I urge you to understand what this most likely means, is that the groups of Christians that were written about were simply following what process of the Lord's Supper the apostles first instituted them. Thank you.